And welcome to The Verdict. Kent Meyers with Mick Cornett, once again on this Sunday, bringing you a good show for The Verdict. Mick, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, Kent, and congratulations on putting together such a good show today. This is very topical.
Well, we really think it will be. We're going to have Professor Joe Ty from the University of Oklahoma College of Law, who has a fascinating background and will have insight into a lot of things that are going on out at the Supreme Court. Over at the Supreme Court, up at the Supreme Court, however you should refer to it. But Joe's going to join us for his third appearance here in a little bit, and we'll find out what's going on with the machinations with the replacement of a vacant seat. Mick, I think it's going to be good. Let's kind of take a brief break for our sponsors to have their say. So you're watching The Verdict with Mick Cornett and Kent Meyers, and soon Professor Joe Ty. We'll be right back.
During my time as Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of the Interior, I witnessed a fundamental transformation in the government-to-government relationship between tribes and the United States. It has really been a special time when a lot of past disputes have been addressed. What I hope is that history has turned a corner with Indian tribes. My name's Kevin Washburn, and I'm a professor of law at the University of New Mexico School of Law, and I'm a Chickasaw. I always joke that I don't know why anybody's a tax lawyer, but I know why I'm an Indian law lawyer. The joy of my life is teaching students. It really is a lot of fun teaching young people, sending them out in the world to help take care of their communities. And that's what we try to do. And federal Indian law is a powerful force for that because the law often is on the tribe's side. My Chickasaw lineage comes from my mother's side of the family. She was a very strong, powerful woman. I know she had some rough times, but there's such a tremendous sense of pride now because we have really come a long way since those times. The Chickasaw Nation has always been about helping people to help themselves and help ensure that the community remains strong. And today, it's Chickasaws taking care of Chickasaws. I don't look like a Native American necessarily, but I am a full citizen of the Chickasaw Nation, and I'm very proud of that. The unconquered and unconquerable Chickasaw Nation is part of my bloodstream.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofanation.com.
One of the best kept secrets about the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit is that it can be used at a trade school or a technical school, and it doesn't have to be used at a university or college. These are benefits that the veterans have earned through their service, and they should take advantage of it.
Veterans really need to understand that there are many resources offered by the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs. They are there to help you find the right school for you, the school that will help you and your family make great steps into your future.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Meyers with Mick Cornett and our guest Joe Ty, professor at the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Let me go ahead and introduce Joe. He did his undergraduate work at Harvard, did his law work at Harvard, and after his law graduation, he went to work at the famous place, the United States Supreme Court, as a clerk for my favorite justice of all time, Justice John Paul Stevens. He worked as a clerk for Justice Stevens. He also clerked for Byron Whizzer White, a famous college football player as well as a famous Supreme Court justice. He, on his spare time, if he ever has any, he does pro bono work in civil rights litigation matters. And he teaches at the University of Oklahoma College of Law, constitutional law, and the United States Supreme Court. So we've asked Joe to come on and talk about some of his experiences and what his take is on some of these things. Joe, glad to have you.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Mick, where would you like to go first?
Well, Professor Ty, let's talk about your role at the university and the law school, and how do you teach in this kind of Zoom-oriented, COVID transpiring world?
I do my best to instill fear in my students on the screen. and the trick to doing that is to call on as many of them as possible in the hour that we have together. It actually works better over Zoom than in person, because in person we're all distanced and wearing masks. And you guys know, as lawyers and as politicians, that you need to see the fear and on their faces. It's not just their eyes, their mouths that say so much. So I actually prefer the screen to being in person.
Well, are you teaching solely on Zoom, or do you have some in face-to-face and some Zoom?
I do solely on Zoom. I do meet with my students socially distanced outside of class, but for the most part, I find that teaching online allows us to connect actually a little bit better. Also, ironically, the fact that we see into each other's homes, helps us to establish this kind of personal connection that would be lacking when we're distanced and masked in person.
Talk about office hours. Do you maintain office hours, and do you do that by Zoom or face-to-face?
I do that mainly by Zoom, and I've had more office hour meetings by Zoom than I have in person. So I think students just find it so convenient just to hit a button and I'm there.
Well, are you having any technological problems?
Oh yeah, all the time. So I have my Zoom, I have my iPhone, and sometimes it's a good old-fashioned phone call when all else fails.
Wow. Well, Professor Ty, we have an opening on the Supreme Court, and I know that's the type of law that you love to discuss. So what are your initial thoughts on the opening?
Well, Justice Brennan on the U.S. Supreme Court used to say the most important rule in constitutional law was the rule of 5. You got 5 votes out of 9, you can do anything. And I think the same applies in the Senate, although the math is a little bit different, right? You got 51, you can do anything, including delaying a vote or rushing a vote. So I think, if the Republicans have the vote, they're going to push through that nominee. And I don't want to drone on and on, but I can talk about the history of nominations at the Supreme Court. It really is fascinating. There's nothing.
Jump in.
Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. If you look at the Constitution, all it does is it sets up a Supreme Court, but it doesn't say how many justices there should be. And the first Supreme Court established by Congress in 1789 had 6 seats. But when Jefferson won the presidency, the Federalists controlled Congress, and the lame duck president, Adams, reduced the number of seats to 5 so that Jefferson wouldn't be able to put his man on the court. And once Jefferson's party regained control of the Senate in 1802, they put the number back up to 6. And so the number has been going up and down throughout history. Actually, it stopped right after the Civil War. By the time of the Civil War, there were actually 10 seats on the Supreme Court. But after Lincoln got assassinated, the Reconstructionist Republicans didn't like Andrew Johnson, thought that he was too sympathetic to the South, so they reduced the number of seats from 10 to 7. So he wouldn't be able to pack the court. But after he left office, they set it at 9, and that's where it's been ever since.
Well, so we shouldn't be surprised that there's talk now of changing the number on the court for purely political reasons, not necessarily what makes the best decision-making group.
That's right. The fight over the court has always been political.
And this is, you have to look a ways back, but when's the last time we changed the number?
1868, I believe, after Andrew Johnson left office. And it's been that way, I guess, for almost a century and a half. If I'm doing my math right, more than a century and a half.
I know you are familiar with RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and her work on the court. Talk a little bit, if you will, about her legal career.
Gosh, what Thurgood Marshall was for racial equality and desegregation, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was for gender equality and protections against gender discrimination. She was a pioneer in getting the court to extend constitutional protections for equality on the basis of gender. And there's a whole bunch of landmark cases that have her fingerprints all over them. If I can just talk about maybe one or two, the one that I think would interest our audience most is
Joe, excuse me for interrupting. We got about 30 seconds left, but we can pick this up after the break. But go ahead and get started because we'd love to hear it.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, here's the teaser. Craig v. Boren. The name of one side of that case might sound familiar to you. It's an icon of Oklahoma, my former boss, David Boren. But it involves beer and the Supreme Court.
Well, what about that?
Well, Oklahoma, decades ago, set the drinking age for men at 21 and for women at 18. But of course, college kids were smart enough to figure out that they could just have their girlfriends, the guys could just have their girlfriends buy the beer. But nonetheless, Ruth Bader Ginsburg thought that this was a great case to convince an all-male Supreme Court that gender discrimination could cut both ways and could be as bad for men as for women. And the Supreme Court agreed with her. And I can get into the legal details after the break.
Yeah, well, we'd like for you to. I was interested in just very, very briefly, the legislature set the drinking age lower for women than for men.
Yes.
Did they ever espouse any reason for doing that?
Oh, yeah. Guys are dumber, more likely to get drunk and to get into accidents.
Well, on that bright note, we need to take a break. Our guest today is Professor Joe Tye from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. You're watching The Verdict with Mick, Cornett, and Kent Meyers.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams ranked number 2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Meyers with Mick Cornett and our guest, Professor Joe Tye from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Joe, when we went to break, you were beginning to talk a little bit about Craig v. Boren. Would you mind finishing up that thought?
Sure. Well, to boil down Oklahoma's reasoning for setting the drinking age higher for males than for females at 21 rather than 18, guys are dumber and more dangerous when they get drunk. Right?
That never changes. There are a lot of things that ought to be adjusted.
But the Supreme Court agreed with Justice then Attorney Ginsburg's reasoning that, look, that's a gender stereotype. You actually need evidence that guys drinking alcohol actually are more dangerous on the road between 18 and 21. And Oklahoma did not have any evidence that they got into.
Court didn't want to take judicial notice of that, I guess.
No, they agreed with Ginsburg that as far as gender discrimination is concerned, you need actual evidence rather than just generalized notions of what males and females might or might not do. And so that's an important principle that I think protects our daughters to this day, that you can't just base decisions on gender based upon what you believe rather than based upon the facts on the ground.
It also seems to me that Ginsburg's legacy is cemented in pop culture with the movie that was made. It's kind of unusual for a Supreme Court justice to be a principal in a major motion picture.
Right. And of course, she's this tiny woman who speaks very slowly and softly. And it's amazing what her outsized pop culture image is. And I think that's a testament to the stature of her legal legacy.
What do you think the hearings will be like this time around with the nominee? It's somewhat kind of in a truncated format.
I think both sides know that it's a done deal because the Republicans have the votes to confirm her. And so I think they're all looking ahead at what happens after the election and trying to game out whether or not the Democrats will flip the Senate and whether they can pack the court. But I think the fight will be less vicious than over Kavanaugh just because there's no point to it.
So a few days or a few weeks, what would the length of the hearings be?
I think the hearings will probably last about a week and we'll get a vote before the election. So it's very quick.
Now, after the Senate votes to confirm, is she officially on the court, or is there some other step that has to be taken?
Oh, as soon as they vote her up and she takes the oath, she's a justice and she can start deciding cases.
Now, I don't want to ask anything that puts you in a bad spot. So if you can't talk about this, just tell me. But do you know the nominee personally?
I do not. I knew the last two, but I don't know her. I know people who know her, but not well enough for me to speak about her personally.
But she's been on the circuit court for a number of years?
I believe just for a year or two, she's been on the Seventh Circuit. Before then, she was a law professor at Notre Dame.
Well, what do you see as the future for the court? I mean, do you, if you were a betting man, would you bet that that if this confirmation takes place prior to the election, as we are assuming, that the Democrats will indeed try to do something to pack the court?
I think there will be strong pressure from the left for them to do that, but I don't know if they have enough votes in the middle to do something that, I guess, extreme in modern times, because it hasn't happened since the 19th century, and I'm not sure that Biden's heart would be in it. If they don't pack the court, then the court will be solidly conservative, 6-3. So they can always afford to lose one vote. So I think we will see the court continuing in the current direction that it's going, which tends to be.
Go ahead.
Which I think tends to be a more conservative and business-friendly court, and a court that is more attuned to religious liberty claims.
Joe, have we had a more conservative court in our lifetime than 6-3? I'm trying to think back. I don't remember one.
No, I don't think so. For the last many decades, from the Rehnquist court to now, it's been largely 5-4. With the balance center right. Now I think the balance will be solidly right, and the swing vote will no longer be John Roberts, because Roberts now will be, ironically, in the middle to the left of the court.
Let me ask you an unfair question. What is your prediction with the 6-3 court as it will be constituted about the future of Roe v. Wade?
Oh, I think a majority of the court will be savvy enough not to overrule Roe v. Wade, even if they felt that it should be overruled. Instead, it'll just be, cabined, very legalistically, but I think significantly.
Let me ask you the same question about the Affordable Care Act.
So that case is coming up this fall, and if Judge Barrett makes it on the court, she will vote on it. Roberts, of course, saved it twice. If I were a betting man, I don't know. I don't think my wife would let me bet on that one.
If you're a betting man, you're a wise one.
Yeah.
Do you know of any known reason why she would have to recuse on that case?
I don't know of any. And of course, the judicial rules of ethics don't actually apply to the U.S. Supreme Court, so each of them make their own decision about whether to recuse.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, let's take a step back or two. Tell us a little bit about your work with my favorite justice, Justice John Paul Stevens, while you were a clerk there. Did you go with Justice Stevens right out of law school?
No, I did a clerkship on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and then I practiced as a lawyer in Massachusetts for a year before I went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I loved working for John Paul Stevens. One of the things that I admired about him was that I could never tell which way he would end up on a case, but he read the briefs himself, and he always wrote the first drafts of his own opinions. And so, taxpayers got their money's worth out of him.
Was he a sports fan?
Oh, yeah. Loved golf, loved baseball. We taught him how to play fantasy baseball online. He whipped us all because he followed baseball more closely than we did.
Well,
Ty, are your students engaged in current events, or are their noses in the book so heavily that they just pretty much have to take on the material? Or do you hear them talking about things like the Supreme Court opening or the Affordable Care Act and current events? How much is that a part of your course?
If I let them, they would make every day about Donald Trump and the U.S. Supreme Court, because so much of what I teach in constitutional law and in First Amendment is happening out there on the streets and in the White House and in our politics. And I do use President Trump and the protests as examples, but I also try to take a step back and show that the questions that are presented, they're questions that have recurred throughout history, and we need to think about constitutional law beyond this moment and beyond this president.
Well, Joe, how long have you been at the university?
Oh, gosh, almost 2 decades, since 2003. They used to think I'm a student. They no longer confuse me for one.
You mean you joined as a 5-year-old?
Pretty much, I looked like one.
Well, what do you think is the, in just about 30 seconds, what do you think is the state of legal education today under the circumstances with which we are dealing?
Well, it's certainly in flux, but I think it's a good challenge for us to figure out what really matters in legal education. Is it seeing each other face to face, or is it grappling with the problems of the day wherever we are? And I think it's the latter, fortunately.
Well, on that, we're going to have to close the show. We appreciate we've run out of time. Professor Ty, thank you so much for joining us. Mick and I really do appreciate it. And after 2 minutes of voices from our sponsors, we'll be back to close the show. You're watching The Verdict.
It used to be okay in hospitals. It used to be okay in movie theaters. It was okay in classrooms, restaurants, and airplanes. But thanks to a greater understanding of the dangers, that's not okay anymore. So now that we know secondhand smoke causes lifelong health problems, why is it still okay to smoke with children in the car? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's get serious about protecting kids. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
You have children coming from a different lifestyle, different mindset. You have to open your arms and really do what you have to do to have that child become a part of your family. And if it's more patience, that's what you do. Kids got to know they can trust you. And that's what we've tried to do with these kids.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Meyers closing this show with where we had as our guest Professor Joe Tye from the University of Oklahoma College of Law. Joe's been a friend for a long time and just is an outstanding professor, has all kinds of awards, and we are sure pleased that he could join us. Mick, what do you think?
You can tell he's one of those people that can make a subject come alive. I'm sure there are law professors out there that teach constitutional matters, and the material can be very, very dry. But you can tell there's a spark in his speech and a twinkle in his eye when he's talking about these things, and it's almost as if he brings the history alive and highlights some of the things that are very, very important. I mean, you can't talk much about the founding fathers and the way this country was created without talking about the Constitution and the importance of setting up that checks and balances. You can get more information about him and his work at the OU Law School by going to their website. That address is www.law.ou.edu. And I'll remind our viewers that we have a website. We'd like you to log on. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see on a future show. That website is theverdict.tv. Kent, that's probably going to wrap it up.
It is indeed. Thanks for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you next week again on The Verdict.